Our sacred story this morning and the centerpiece for for the sermon today comes out of the book of Genesis, and I want to set it up for you because we have spent no time in the book of Genesis up to this point. And so if we just read it out just in the way without setting it up for you, you might not know sort of the significance and the power of the story. You might just be confused. So in the book of Genesis, there is a person named Jacob. He is one of the patriarchs, and he has 2 wives and a couple of concubines, and by those 2 wives and a couple of concubines, he has 12 children. 10 of the children come from his wife Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah. Is that right? Russ, is that right? Yes! Let the record show. That's right. And Jacob loves those children. But there's one child who he kind of favors, and it's not it's not uncommon, I think, for parents to sometimes favor. It's okay. It happens. And Jacob is one of us. He's one of ours. And there's one that he favors named Joseph. And the other 10 brothers that were from his wife Leah and Zilpah and Bilhah, they are a little bit jealous, and they don't really like him, but Joseph makes it really hard to like him because he's somewhat of a brat. He is. And there comes a time when the other brothers, they just get tired of it, and so they see a caravan, and they kidnap Joseph, and they sell him to the caravan, and the caravan goes to Egypt, where Joseph is there for a while. So let's fast forward and just kind of jump to the next part, which is Joseph goes from being a prisoner to basically rising to an equivalent of prime minister of Egypt. The only person who has a little bit more power than he does is Pharaoh himself. Joseph has a great deal of power there. Now, there's a famine that's been going on, and Joseph is wise, and he sees the famine coming, and so he stores grain and food to the point where Egypt has enough and actually has an overflowing abundance that other people are starting to come to Egypt asking for food. Whew. 10 of the people who come asking Joseph for food are his 10 brothers. And they haven't seen Joseph for a while, and they don't recognize him. So Joseph, did I mention that he's a brat? Arrests them and sends them back to where they came from. But they have some perseverance, and they come back, and they ask him again. And Joseph has been wrestling in the night on what to do. And so this time they bring Joseph's younger brother, Benjamin, back with them. And he really likes Benjamin. It's his younger brother. It's the only one younger than Joseph. And so Joseph is wrestling in the night with what to do, how to interact with his brothers, which is where we pick up the story now. The brothers are in a room. They're anxious. They're waiting for the prime minister to arrive. And Joseph enters the room, and he makes a decision. And that's what Sharon's going to read for you.
Genesis 45, verses 1 to 15. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I'm your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years. There are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father, and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you, your household, all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry, bring my father down here.' Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him." Please join me in the congregational response to our sacred story. This is the sacred story of God and God's people. May the still speaking God speak to us this day. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Sharon. So it would usually happen on Wednesday night. For years, when I was pastoring a church in Montana, I would be the lead camp director for the senior high camp at Camp Mimanagish, south of Big Timber in the crazy mountains along the Boulder River. It was called the Camp Mimanagish, which is a Indian word for the singing river, and it's called the singing river because there are big boulders in the Boulder River, and when the river would hit it, it would make this loud crashing noise. It would sing, and along this banks of the singing river, this camp I would direct, like I said, every summer, and about 50 to 70 high schoolers would descend for a week on Sunday afternoon. And so on Sunday evening, they were just so excited to be away from their families, their community, and to be back at camp. And it was just this crazy menagerie of kids just running around like monkeys. Monday, they calmed down a little bit, and they started to form their cliques. Now, some of them had been to camp before, and so they knew their clique, and they were so excited to see their friends from the previous years. Others were at camp for the very first time, and they were starting to figure out what the lay of the land was. Tuesday, they started to get homesick. And they would cry, and they got depressed, and they started to remove themselves. They would start to bicker with their cliques. It only took 24 hours. And they felt bloated because they weren't used to eating that much food. They weren't used to getting 3 meals a day and snacks 3 times a day, and they weren't used to having say over their own portion control. So they completely overate, and they were way uncomfortable and getting constipated. Because I don't know if you've had camp food, but it's not kale and Brussels sprouts. So then Wednesday, it would happen usually at Vespers. They're tired, they're bloated, they're constipated, they're homesick, they're starting to bicker with their friends, they're cold at night, they haven't slept well. We've put them in a chapel around a fire, and we've asked them a question about how do you experience God's love, or where have you experienced God's grace, or what does it mean to live in a beloved community that accepts you? And it would be like, you could just see it. One of them would just start to bounce. Like a kernel of corn thrown in a hot oil in a popcorn kettle. and they would just bounce and bounce and bounce, and then lo and behold, boom, and it would just come flooding out of them. Because here's the thing. If you ask somebody to tell you, if you ask somebody to tell you about the time that they've experienced love, they will tell you about times that they have been heartbroken. If you ask someone to tell you about what it means to experience forgiveness and grace, they will tell you about times that they have hurt someone or they have been hurt themselves. If you ask them to tell you about what it means to live in a beloved, accepting community, they will tell you about times that they have been isolated and fragmented from society. And we all have it in us, all of these experiences, and we're just dying to tell them to someone, but we're scared and we're frightened, we're fearful that if someone actually hears these things coming out of our mouths, that they will judge us and they will not like us and they will isolate and shun us. So in camp, they're tired, they're bickering with their friends, they're constipated, they're homesick, and they're just dying, and it was just this recipe for them to just share. And Vespers, which had usually lasted 15 minutes before lights out, would last for an hour and a half. Because once the first one popped, it just started popping all over the place. And what was a fake beloved community before became an authentic beloved community of its acceptance. Once the kids took off their masks and they revealed their true identity to each other. See, they had learned these amazing survival skills on the playground about conforming and keeping your emotions in check and not rocking the boat. And anytime that you're hurt, pushing it down and not sharing it with anyone. But they were dying to have an opportunity to share their own life and to be true to themselves and to show that to someone else and for it to be accepted, to truly be vulnerable, which is incredibly hard to do. True vulnerability means taking off the mask that we wear to protect and conceal our true identity and taking it off so it allows us to expose our real self, our authentic self, and let it shine through to someone else. And it is so hard to do. I know it's hard to do, and I'm horrible at doing it. Except here. This is the only place that I feel comfortable revealing my true self. Because there's this imaginary kind of fourth wall. Do you see the space between me and the first pew? That's not on accident. That protects me. And when I'm revealing something about myself, it's for a larger moral and ethical point. So it protects me in some way. I'm not actually revealing myself to you. Do you see what I'm saying? Take me out for a cup of coffee. Ask me how I'm doing. You know what I'll say? Fine. How's life? Good. The only time I'll really open up is if you ask me about Star Wars. It's hard. It's hard. Revealing yourself, having the trust in someone else to receive what you're sharing with them is incredibly tough. It's not easy, and I totally get it. Which is why this is, and I know I say this so many times, week in and week out, this is why this is one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible. But I have a lot of stories that I like. I'm a church geek, and I like the Bible. And there's a lot of stories that speak to me in it. Joseph and his brothers, they're our family. Through Christ Jesus, we are the adopted children of God, and we are adopted into this family of Jacob and the 12 brothers. These are our kin, which means that their DNA is within us. And this story reveals how difficult it is to reveal yourself even to family. The people that you should be able to reveal yourself to. and be authentic to and to share your real self with. And it's incredibly difficult. But it is the only time that Joseph and his brothers have a true, authentic relationship with one another is after Joseph has the courage to take his mask off and to reveal his true self, to step out of the control and dominance of being the prime minister of Egypt and to reveal himself as Joseph, their brother. True and authentic relationship with his brother doesn't occur until after he takes the risk of revealing his true self. He has to risk being hurt, of being rejected. They already sold him into slavery once. They didn't necessarily like him. He was tempted. I know, I could feel it. You can hear it in his voice in the story. He was tempted not to do it because he might have said, "I am Joseph, your brother," and they might have turned around and walked out of the room. And that would have been soul-crushing to him. But he believed in himself, and he believed in his brothers, and he gave up control enough to allow grace to occur in their midst. There is a fantastic TED Talk that went viral about 4 years ago from a researcher and a PhD in social work her name is Dr. Brené Brown. She's based mostly out of Texas, and she has been working in social work for decades, and she's been doing a particular bout of research for about 10 years. Her work is about the power of vulnerability and how shame affects our relationships. And after nearly a decade of study of collecting thousands of stories from people, Dr. Brown has basically separated people into two groups. One is a group of people who feel belonged and have strong relationship and have a strong sense of self-worth and love in their life and belonging in their life. And another group of people who feel isolated and alone, of broken and fragmented relationships, and they have a great deal of shame. And she found that there's only really one thing that separates the first group, who feels belonged and loved and worthy, and the second group that feels isolated and fragmented and alone. And the only thing that she can see that differentiates the two groups is that the one group feels as if they are worthy of feeling love, of being belonged, of having relationship, and the other group doesn't believe that they are worthy of love and companionship and community. One has a sense of worthiness, and the other one has a sense of shame. People feel like they are worthy of love and community and family and relationship. They're worthy of having joy and happiness in their life. They're worthy of having peace and belonging. And the other group feels a personal shame, and they don't feel worthy. And because of that shame, they isolate themselves from everyone else. Now, shame has a lot of antecedents in it. It has a lot of roots. There's a lot of different ways that shame can be manifest. But Dr. Brown has found that one thing wraps up all of shame combined, and that is fear. Our fear of being rejected. Our fear of not being liked. Our fear of not being smart enough, or beautiful enough, or young enough, or healthy enough. And that is the fear that we impose on ourselves and society has taught us. But she has found that there are 3 C's that help us overcome shame and live into a sense of worthiness. And those 3 things are courage, compassion, and connection. Courage, compassion, and connection. Courage is not bravery. It is not running headfirst into the fire. What courage is it comes from the Latin word which means heart. It's the Latin word cur. And it means revealing your true and whole heart to someone else. That's what courage is. The courage to reveal yourself, maybe reveal yourself to yourself in the mirror, or having the courage to reveal yourself to someone else in your life. It's the willingness to risk one's own heart. That's what is courageous. Compassion is being kind to others and showing kindness to others. But here's the thing about compassion. You actually have a hard time showing compassion and kindness to others if you do not allow yourself to be compassionate and kind to yourself. You have to start with you before you can show it to others. And then finally is connection, which is actually a result of the first two, courage and compassion. And those who are willing to show their true heart to someone else, those who are allowing themselves to be kind to themselves and to others, they have a deep sense of connection and belonging. That is the result of courage and compassion. So how do you do that? Because it's incredibly hard. You have to risk being vulnerable to someone else. You have to risk true vulnerability to yourself. And the mirror is a hard thing to sometimes look into. The reward, though, for taking that risk is that you can experience joy and happiness, belonging and love and connection. But vulnerability scares the bejesus out of us. And we'll do anything to avoid it. Dr. Brown realized that those who have a great sense of shame also have a great deal, or work very hard at avoiding being vulnerable. It's an anecdotal claim, she admits, but it's based on statistical fact. We are the most in debt, the most obese, the most medicated, the most addicted adult population in the history of the United States of America. That's a statistical fact. Dr. Brown thinks that those are all symptoms of the fact that we have been conditioned not to feel or reveal our true self and be vulnerable with one another. Vulnerability scares us so much that we'll do whatever we can to numb it. We'll go out. I don't want to feel and take the risk, so I'm going to go buy this new car. I don't want to feel the risk, so I'm going to eat this banana muffin. I don't want to feel the risk, so I'm going to drink that beer. I don't want to feel this risk, so I am going to take this medication. And all of those things individually, there's nothing wrong with any of those. But when we're using those things to numb ourselves so that we won't be vulnerable with other people and risk showing our true selves, then that's where the behavior becomes a problem. Or we'll buy this, eat that, drink this, swallow that, have sex with him or her, yell at my neighbor, my wife, my kid, my president, that guy on Facebook who said that stupid thing. I can't believe he said that. How dare he? That redneck. And we shout someone down instead of asking the question, why do you have that belief? Where did that come from? Why don't you tell me where that comes from? Why you're saying that? Having a sense of curiosity about someone. Instead, vulnerability scares us so much, it scares the bejesus out of us. So speaking of Jesus, he showed us another way. He showed us a way to live, an authentic community, sharing a true heart. One of the things we don't talk enough about is how much Jesus loved Jesus. We talk so much about how much Jesus loved others that we just think it came out of nowhere. But Jesus shows a great deal of love and compassion and kindness to himself, which allows him to have compassion and kindness, to have the courage to reveal his true self to others. He offers us that way to live, So let me tell you what Jesus told you. Let me just echo what he has to say. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of grace, forgiveness, and kindness. You are God's beloved child, created in God's image and nurtured each and every day of your life by God's grace. You are beautiful, just as you are, because you are sacred and you are divine. And I want to get to know you. And as much as it scares the bejesus out of me, I want you to know me. So let's live in the way of Joseph, in the way of Christ, in the way of God, with courage, compassion, so that we can feel connected. I'm ready to take off my mask. You might not always like what's underneath, but we'll be kind, right? We'll be gracious. I can trust you. Thanks be to God. Amen.